genome is very distinct from the African genomes from which they were taken. Now, you couple that with the fact that there is more genetic diversity within the African continent than in the rest of the world put together, which means that, on average, someone from Senegal is more different genetically to someone from Angola than either of those people are to anyone else on the rest of the planet. And that's just what the genetics says. So I know this is quite a brain scrambling concept.
No, I'm with you.
But this is one of the problems with the earlier conversation about how we categorize people. We say black people, right? Because Linnaeus said black people, Homo sapiens Afra or Africanus. But actually, it's a completely incoherent biological category because of the amount of genetic diversity that exists in people from who are in Africa or from the African diasporas. So how this relates to the transatlantic slave trade means that you've got two people taken from maybe neighboring tribes or counties or whatever the equivalent is, or countries, who are taken from their birthplace, put onto ships, mixed around, they live or die, they then traded around, forcibly mated potentially. We know from the genetics now that.
Now, what he is saying is what Israelites have been saying, black people that know that they are the real Jews. What history says, it's in the history record, but he's coming from a genetic perspective and saying that there's a difference not only in people of the diaspora, meaning the black people that came in through the transatlantic slave trade, between them and the Africans. There is also a difference between Africans right on the continent of Africa. There is so many different countries, more than 54 countries, and none of these people are the same. So what it shows is that how we think, how the American education has taught everyone that if you come from Africa, the blanket term is you're just African, you're all the same. Whereas that has never been the truth. And now even in the genomes and the genetics, it has been proven that there is no cohesiveness. There's so many different variations. The crazy part is that he didn't just use, it's not just Black Americans or Haitians or who are Jamaicans. When they look at people right there from Senegal to the Congo, there's variation there. Nobody is the same. And so this is what we've been screaming from the top of our lungs for forever, is that Black people in America are not the same as the Africans that sold them. They were not the same culturally. They were not the same ethnically. You don't sell somebody that is your own people. You just don't. That has never happened. It's never happened in the history of the world. Not with the Romans, not with the Greeks, not with the Egyptians. It's never happened that somebody sells their own people ever. So now all of a sudden, people change. In this instance in West Africa, all of a sudden, these people sold their own family. Nah, that didn't happen. It did not happen. And this is just more proof that there is a difference between the people that came through the transatlantic slave trade and the native Africans that sold them. Okay, what's your thoughts on that? Give me your thoughts. Black Rain had said, he said, just like they tell us that it doesn't matter what Christ looked like, but if Christ was them, they would lose it. It's funny you brought that out because I'm going to go into that. I'm going to go into that image today, this evening. I'm going to touch on that. Right. But this is something that's very touchy with our people, as far as when we say we're not Africans, we're not native Africans. OK, we came from the landmass. That's where we came from. We came from West Africa. But you still have people there that are not African, that don't claim to be African. They claim to be Israelites. And their lineage is from antiquity. you know, that's where their lineage is. Now you have, you know, and it's funny that we, you know, he's saying what we've all been saying and what a lot of people already know. A lot of people agree. Many black people don't agree with the fact that we're God's chosen people, but they do agree. You can ask any black person just randomly on the streets, how do you feel about the way that Africans are towards black people? Well, I don't like them. They don't like us. I've heard that a million times interviewing people on the streets. Like, we know that there is a disconnect, and most people say the disconnect is because we've been here in America. And that is not the disconnect. The disconnect is we're not the same people. We're just two different dark races. That's another thing. Like, hashtag should be all dark races are not the same. That should be a hashtag. Like, that should be an epiphany, a wake up moment for a lot of people that bunch anybody with melanin in their skin together. When you go and look at those Dravidian people, those real dark East Indian people, they're a different kind of black than a dark-skinned black person in America. When you go to Sudan and you look like at a dark black person, they're a different type of black. Like, we're all melanated people. Everybody on the planet Earth starts from that point, being melanated. Doesn't mean you're the same, right? You go look on the walls of ancient Egypt. Let me see. The brother said, this is okay. Great find. Let me see. Reigning woman. Exactly. We're not all the same. Furthermore, some of us have Aboriginal roots right here. I have strong Native American Indian roots. That's true also. There's Native Indian roots right here. There are a lot of black people in America that goes back to the Dawes Rolls. That goes back to the time when they started to divvy up Native American lands because they did not want to keep those treaties, and more European settlers were coming and coming. So they started to divvy up those lands, and they got government officials to, write down a list of people who were from certain tribes, and white people were able to pay corrupt government officials $5 to put their names on those rolls and then be considered an actual Native American Indian. So many of the Native American Indians today that people claim that they're Native Indian, they're really just Europeans. That's it. That's all. But at the same time, the darker tribes were excluded from this. And you had a lot of Indian tribes, because of the distrust of the white man, they were not dealing with the white man. So they didn't even bother to get on no list to say that they are a Cherokee, that they are a Choctaw. They didn't even do it. And so now today you have people who get the benefits and all of those things and are, in the boards of the tribal nations and, running casinos that are not even Native American Indians. They're Europeans. That was a good point you brought out. Black Rain said, Khan, after Jerusalem was sacked by the Romans, we were scattered in the wilderness of Africa. That's right. Many Jews fled into the interiors of Africa. There's many traces of Africans being in North Africa. I'm sorry, Israelites being in North Africa, being in Upper Egypt, as low as Nubia, Aswan, Elephantine, right? That's what I mean, you can't just clump everybody together because we're dark skinned. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Now, the point that I just got reminded of is that when you look at all the history of dark nations, we know the Egyptians were a Hamitic people. They were Hamites. They were a African race. Okay. You had all of their enemies that they would have. They would have enemies, right? That they would go to war with, and they would put them on the hieroglyphs. These enemies were other dark nations. There was never no, oh, we all black, this is Pan-Africanism, we all one because we all melanated. There was never no black unity in the history of the world. Like, people knew who they were. They had enemies, and their enemies were other dark races, Black Rain says, why they try to put Kamala in with us, and crazy work. And that goes back to how, we just look at somebody with some color in their skin like they're us. Don't know the history, don't know the lineage, didn't know that her, she comes from a British slave master ancestry. Like, come on. Esau does that because becomes you like the last time. Yeah. Listen, today you have actual. Look, when I was coming from Puerto Rico, I was on a plane with a white woman that was saying she was Puerto Rican because her auntie was Puerto Rican. And I looked her up and down and I was like, I don't see no indigenous nothing in your phenotype. I don't see no indigenous, Indian, nothing in no melanin, nothing in your phenotype. But I said, that's how it is. That's how it is in America. You have purebred European Englishmen that became native Indians overnight.